the Marshall Tucker Band became so big, they didn't have to open for anybody. They were headlining. So then Charlie Daniels Band came along, and they would open for them, tour with them. Every night after, late in their gig, they'd invite Charlie out to sit in with them on the fiddle. And so, and then Charlie would come in, and he played on a couple of their albums, and we became good friends. One day he said, Paul, I'm getting ready. I'm doing another album. We're going out with my band, and would you consider working with a producer? And I said, yeah, man, sure.
Hey y'all, this is Chris Hick, and welcome to the Southern Rock Insider. If you like what you see, please hit subscribe and click the notification bell. It's time to rock Southern style. The Southern Rock Insider.
Just about 3 months, I found myself living in Macon, and I turned down Rick Hall's gig and turned down Dwayne's band, and I took the job at Capricorn. And so within that first year, few months being here, getting back to Chuck Leavell, I call him. He was Chuck Leavell at that time, and he was in 12th grade at high school. And I said, Chuck, you might want to consider getting over here pretty quick. I said, man, something's going to bust wide open over here. They got plans. We got the studio happening, and they about to kick off a record label, and you get in on the ground floor. And he quit school in the 12th grade and moved to Macon to be here, and came in and got on an album, one of the first records we did here, which consequently didn't go anywhere. But anyway, he made his like Chuck Leavell's in town.
Here, right.
Chuck Leavell's in town.
Okay.
One of the first projects I played on at the Capricorn Studio when I moved here in 1969, I believe it came up within that first year. There was a guitar player here named Johnny Jenkins, and he had started out with Johnny Jenkins and the Pine Toppers. Back during the 60s, they'd play a lot of shows, fraternity parties and all in Tuscaloosa. And I heard that Otis started out being their bus driver. And anyway, Johnny had sort of leaned back against the stump and was taking it easy when we moved to Macon. And Phil always believed in Johnny some way. But Johnny, he wouldn't fly. He wouldn't get on an airplane for nothing, especially what happened to Otis, I suppose. And Phil couldn't get Johnny to do anything. And he tried to convince him to come in the studio to record an album. And Johnny wouldn't come unless he said, give me some cash. And every day before he'd come in the studio, he'd do like that right there. And Phil he'd have to cross his palm or something, And, a lot of those guys, man, they had been taken advantage of so many times over the years and playing the chitlin circuit and all that stuff. And they got used to being shortchanged, and they just thought, show me that money, Anyway, he would come in, and at that time, Jerry Wexler had gotten into New Orleans music and voodoo kind of stuff with Dr. John, and they put a big push behind Dr. John. And so they needed a new image of Johnny Jenkins instead of just some old blues player, And so they suggested we cut Walk on Gilded Splinters, which had been a Dr. John song, and then Jackie Avery wrote a couple of voodoo-oriented things, and Johnny wouldn't play. He didn't want to play on it. So the studio band, we went in and cut on this stuff. Then they bring Johnny in, and he would say, okay, I'll sing that. So he put vocals on some of it, and he didn't. Most of the stuff he was singing phonetically, like gilly gilly come walk on. So he didn't know what it meant, and so. But we got the vocals out of it. He didn't like it when it came out, and they said, yeah, they had me singing in Spanish. He said, I don't know about that Spanish. I don't know no Spanish. Actually, it was Creole French and stuff, And the Allman Brothers would come in. Back in those days, there wasn't anything else to do in Macon. There wasn't that many bands, so Allman Brothers Band would wander through, and we'd wander through, and everybody else's sessions, and it was pretty musically incestuous back then. Whoever happened to be in the studio, hey man, come play a lick on this, So Wayne wound up playing on some of it and just be there that day. And I think J-Mo played some congos and maybe Butch played on some stuff. It just happened to be in, no really thought to it. And so when the record came out, or maybe when it came, maybe the re-release, it had Butch Truck, J-Mo in our studio guys. You had to read the fine print, sort of a little publicity kind of thing going on, But they just sort of came in and added to what we already had done. So anyway, that's how the Johnny Jenkins thing came about. And then we had Alex Taylor. They signed Alex Taylor, was the older brother of James Taylor, and we cut his first album, Alex Taylor with Friends and Neighbors. That was all of us players, same kind of thing. People wandering through and adding them till we got an album. And we went on the road, and we did about a 6-week tour, and after 6 weeks, that was the longest 6 years of my life. That 6 years, because I'm not used to cold weather, and we were up in the Northeast in Martha's Vineyard in January and February in Canada, and man, I wanted to go back where the warm south wind blows. And I said, Chuck Leavell was here about this time. I said, Chuck, how would you like to have my gig, man? And Chuck was getting kind of skinny, hanging out here and waiting to be on the ground floor, and yeah, man, I'll take it. So Alex changed his whole, Johnny quit and Bill Stewart quit. We all quit at the whole band wanted to do session work. And so Chuck was here, and I think Charlie Hayward was hanging out here at that time, and they became and Jimmy Knowles had come aboard, and they became Alex's first road band. And then Dr. John came to town, and boy, he will always be my hero. He was my favorite piano player, hands down, of all time. And I got to go out and by this time I started doing quite a bit of studio work, and might have even produced something, I don't know. And I was building up a little better than what I had been. And I started going out with him playing on weekend gigs. I'd work all week in the studio doing sessions, and man, I'd fly on my gig, and I'd fly and meet them. And first gig I went was to Puerto Rico. We did a pop festival, and we flew from there to Detroit and then to Virginia, different places. And man, I'm playing Hammond B3 behind my hero, man, Dr. John. And I'm looking over there the whole time trying to figure out what he's doing and what I'm playing. And that started, then he replaced his whole band. All his players were from California. And at this time, I need to get back in, and I had opportunity to produce somebody. I guess it might have been a Tucker album. And I said, Chuck, man, there's an empty organ seat up there. He said, yeah, man, Dr. John, yeah, man, thank you. So he took my gig there. And so that's how Chuck sort of fit in here. That's how he got started. And then the Allman Brothers, then of course Dwayne passed away, and instead of adding another guitar player right away, they said, why not a keyboard player? And Chuck was here every day, just living in the studio, playing every day. And they started jamming and all, and pretty soon he had a permanent place with them, And that's his big break.
Okay, so when we're talking about these early Capricorn days, let's get into one of the first projects that fell across your lap was the Marshall Tucker Band. It was a new band that just getting signed to come through, and you're signed on to produce their first record.
Well, it's funny how that all happened. The Wet Willie Band was signed first, and they were playing in South Carolina someplace, and they came back raving about this band they saw, and they went straight to Phil Walden and said, man, we heard this band that you just got to hear them, and kept talking about them over and over. And Phil said, well, see if you can't talk them into coming to Macon and playing for us, showcasing for us. So the place that a lot of the acts in that time showcase was down at Grant's Lounge, and I was there that night when they came in and played live for Phil, and Frank Finter was there, and maybe some other Capricorn people, and Phil just flipped out. And so I remember he gave the project to Johnny Santa. Johnny Santa and I were the two staff producers at Capricorn, and I don't know what the decision was. Sometimes, some scientific reason, one guy would get handed a project, one get handed another one. So they handed them to Johnny, and he carried them in and cut some demos. And I never did hear what he cut, but he turned the demos into to Phil and them, and they weren't knocked out one of them. He says, no, tapes don't have it, but I still believe in this band. Hornsby, why don't you try it? So, I thought, okay. So I tried it, and we spent a lot of time with it. And we turned out an album and turned it in, and we had spent so much time on it, I didn't know if it was any good or not. You can
Too close to it, huh?
Too close to it. And for better or for worse, I said, well, here it is. And they just flipped over the thing and immediately started putting Marshall Tucker Band out to tour with the Allmans, opening. And it was a perfect audience for them. And so they had a fan base built up before their first record came out. So when the record came out, it was elementary. I mean, it was a smash. And we got great reviews, and it all just fell into place.
You produced their first how many records?
First album was called the Marshall Tucker Band, and then I did about the next 5 or 6. I think it was maybe six albums overall, I believe. Could have been 7, I don't know.
On those early records too, I noticed you play on them as well. You can hear your piano and organ and stuff.
I did all the anytime there was any keyboard playing to be done on, I did it. And you go see that band play live back then, that original band, and they just knock you out. The enthusiasm and just something they had, a visual thing going. But when you got them in the studio, there was just something missing to me. And I couldn't figure out what it was. I thought, we don't have the visual thing going on it, but something's, and so I just filled in a few things, and especially on that first album, I added a few keyboard tracks, and then it was a hit, big giant hit. And I thought, hell, what I did must have worked. So why mess up that formula? So I continued to play on all the records that I did, and and it worked. And so I played on up through Carolina Dreams, and that's the one that had Heard It in the Love Song. Mm-hmm. That was the biggest record they ever did.
Or Pretty Little Love Song, as people like to call it.
Pretty Little Love Song.
And some great records in there. Which kind of pathway you're working with Charlie Daniels? The way you produced those records caught Charlie's ear, and he wanted your production.
Actually, Charlie had started touring. He would open Marshall Tucker Band became so big they didn't have to open for anybody. They were headlining. So then Charlie Daniels Band came along, and they would open for them, tour with them, and became a thing every night after late in their gig. They'd invite Charlie out to sit in with them on the fiddle, and so and then Charlie would come in and he played on a couple of their albums, and we became good friends. One day he said, Paul, I'm getting ready. I'm doing another album. We're going out with my band, and would you consider working with a producer? And I said, yeah, man, sure. And pretty interesting is I'd never really heard their band. And I went with them to Tuscaloosa one night. And you could tell who they were influenced by in a heartbeat. They had 2 drummers. They had 2 guitar players doing twin stuff and a keyboard player. And to me, it was Allman Brothers. And they did a great job, and the audience loved them, and they were polite. But we already had the Allman Brothers, and so I'm thinking, well, I'll cut a record on. And so when they got ready to encore, it was the first time of the night. He came back out, and he had fiddle in his hand for the first time he'd had it out all night. And he went to play an Orange Blossom Special, and the roof came off this Coliseum. Everybody woke up. And he wound up doing maybe 1 or 2 more tunes, and that was it for the evening. And so fast forward a couple of weeks later, they're coming in to record, and I said, Charlie, man, I've related to how I watched the audience. I said, you should think about using the fiddle more often. That's something nobody else is doing out there that's playing rock and roll music right now. And I don't know if that stuck in his head or what, but they they set up in a side room at Capricorn and auditioned auditioned the material that they wanted to cut. And there wasn't a fiddle song. I said, Charlie, we need a fiddle song in here. So they came up with something that they kind of halfway had been jamming on it. For a working title, they called it Fiddle Boogie. And it was kind of cute. It had some fiddle and guitar harmony and trade-offs and licks and all. But I said, yeah, it's okay, but it's not nearly as good as the other material. He had things like Long Haired Country Boy, and this Fiddle Bug is supposed to compare against it. I said, what do you think about adding some lyrics? And he said, well, I hadn't thought about that. And so the next day I asked him again, I said, what about that Fiddle Boogie? You come up with any words? And I don't know if I got a feeling he was kind of putting me off from it or stalled. And then every day I'd ask him this, and he said, well, I've been giving it some thought. I've got a few ideas, and got down to the last day of recording, and which was about the 5th day. We'd done finished recording and ready to mix, and we still stuck with Fiddle Boogie. And I said, man, we got a dilemma. Man, I said, we need some lyrics. He said, well, I got these lyrics. He said, give me a quiet place for a while. Let me sit down and flesh these out, and I'll come back and run them by you. He went out, came back in about an hour with a yellow legal pad and had all these scribblings on it. He said, all right, turn the mic on. Let me run these lyrics by you and see what you think. So he goes out there, and I'm sitting there with the engineers and everything. He goes singing about Dickie Betts playing on that red guitar, and old Leonard Skinner picking down in Jacksonville, and the Tuckers are cooking in Carolina, and man, we're going nuts. Yeah, that's it. And that was the birth of the South's Gonna Do It Again. And that's exactly, I swear to God, that's how that came about. And at that time, you put the record companies would put out an album, and they would wait and see which song got the most plays from the radios, and then they would release that as a single. So about the month into the album release, Charlie's management called me from Nashville and said, man, I want you to get a single we're ready to pull a single. I thought it was going to be probably Long Haired Country Boy or something. He said, you'll never believe what song they're playing in WLS. South's going to do it again. I said, are you kidding, man? Chicago is playing a fiddle record? Yes, man. 50,000 watt station playing fiddle music. Who would have thought it? So that's what made that album right there. And it's still the biggest record I ever did. It's had longevity. I mean, at the time it came out, the Tuckers were probably selling more, but Charlie's continued to play all these years.
Charlie Daniels was thankful for you to the day he died. I know that for a fact. Working with you was a big part of his life.
He was generous with his compliments on that. But that's the difference in having an album and having a smash album, is having a hit single. Just like Marshall Tucker album, we cut a lot of good albums, but Heard It and Love Song was a hit single.
Right.
And that album Carolina Dreams is outsold everything else, hands on.
Probably because of that one single being
a hit single,
yeah.
So that's the difference. And as we went in to do every album in those days, the record, Capricorn would always give us a pep talk. Now, you guys, see if you can't get us a single.
Do that again,
single. They're thinking, and I mean, hell, that's what it's about when you get down to it. And we go in and we turn out 10, 12-minute songs. And they'd say, now, okay, see if you can't make a single out of this. A single means a 3.5-minute song. We have to take a 10-minute song and with a razor blade, and we cut on tape in those days, and you didn't use a mouse to splice. You got a razor blade and splicing tape. You take a 10-minute song, start out at one tempo, and it ends up hauling ass at the other end, and you have to meet in the middle. We take out a piece, and it's hard to come up with a consistent tempo from start to end. So there's always a set of problems with that, But from the very beginning, Heard It and Love Song, I heard Toy playing that in the dressing room one night before a gig, and I said, man, that's going to be your first hit single right there. And we kept that in mind as we were going in to record the first day. Keep it fairly short, fix it where we can at least edit, take out some guitar solo or piano solo or whatever and shorten it enough. And it came out like 3.5, somewhere in there, and perfect radio.
A couple of years ago, Paul decided to do his own first solo record. It's called Red Hot. And he got lots of people to come play on it. And it's a jubilee of musicians, and there's some great boogie-woogie piano songs on there. Check it out. Paul, what made you decide to do your first solo record all these years?
I never could regiment myself on what style that I wanted to put together as an album or CD. I played some New Orleans style a la Dr. John to some country blues like Ray Charles and all this stuff. But and then I played some other style. I never could define what I wanted to put on a CD until a friend of mine down in Dothan called me one time, Gil Anthony, who you probably know. He said, "Paul, how would you feel about coming and headlining the Wiregrass Blues Festival this year?" And I said, "Oh man, I'm sorry, I can't." I said, "I'm not a front man. I'm just a keyboard player, and like the Tucker albums, I play in the cracks, as I like to say." "Oh, you can sing something. Oh, the people, they're gonna want to hear you sing." And I didn't want to tell him no, and I had plenty of headroom to prepare. Spent about 3 months. I got to thinking, well, what can I do? And so I picked up a grouping of tunes that I thought I could get by on to do for this show. So I got prevailed on E.G. Kite and her band to come as my sort of, because she was the entity for herself. And then I just fit in with them and do a few songs of mine, and we'd get it done, So I wound up doing a lot of New Orleans style things. And then we got through that blues festival thing, and it went over great. And people didn't throw anything. Mm-hmm. And I got to thinking, I spent so much time putting together that CD. It's a shame that I can't use that material for something else. And I got to thinking about, why don't I record it? And that's how the idea for the CD came about. So we took that grouping of tunes that we did at the Blues Festival, added some more stuff that related to it. Then I had to decide. I had so many friends that I'd played music with over the years, and it wasn't a problem of who I'm going to get. It's who I'm going to have to leave out.
You're right.
And I think there's 30-something musicians on that CD. And I mean, if I'm going to get this guy, I got to get this guy.
Right.
Well, but I just got to get this guy too. And
there's somebody you forgot to get on here. You hadn't thought about it yet. That'll turn up one day and go, man, why can't I didn't play on the radio?
Chris Hick is on there.
Yeah, Chris Hick is on there. I was mighty
there.
proud to be on there. Sure was. There's a long list of
Chuck Leavell plays. I wouldn't let Chuck Leavell near a piano. I prevailed on him to come in and put a taste of something. He played some Hammond organ.
Okay.
Played a solo. Now I had to get Chuck in there, but I didn't let him get near the piano. Mm-hmm. Leroy Parnell is on it. Jack Pearson, Tommy Talton,
Bill Stewart,
of course, and Ken Wynn. Oh, and tons. I know you see him getting started because I'll leave out half of them.
So how do you say this? Vive le boogie?
Vive le boogie.
Vive le boogie. All right, Paul. So through the years, lots of albums are being recorded here that are being hits all over the world and stuff like that. And it kind of blew up on itself one day. And tell me how that worked for you and how it started you opening Muscadine here.
Capricorn, I saw it coming. Phil was a brilliant guy, brilliant salesman. But I saw him, he got sidetracked a little bit. He became closely related with Jimmy Carter. And Jimmy suddenly was running for president. And Phil saw an opportunity to raise money using his groups, to contribute money. And it came about as a very critical time in Carter's career. If it hadn't been for these bands, he might not have made it as a president. So Phil had all that type of attention he's getting. And this took a couple of years there, I guess, of building a president and sort of like breaking an act. He was breaking a president. And he spent all of his time working for Carter, and meanwhile the record company's here, and nobody's making any decisions. They have to check with Phil before they can do anything. And meanwhile the bands are, hey man, we need a new van, or we need our Winnebago broke down. Oh well, we'll have to wait and check with Phil on this. So nothing got done, and that's just a sort of an example of what was happening. And then a lot of these bands were getting a little disheartened, and it's becoming time to re-sign. They signed so many bands at one time, and all of a sudden everybody's contract was about to end. Allman Brothers' contract was run out. Marshall Tucker's had run out. Wet Willie was running out. And all of a sudden, from what, they hadn't been getting the attention they thought we'd been getting. And so they fled town. They signed with everybody else. So Phil had borrowed about $6 million. That's a lot of money for most people. And about 1979, $6 million was a lot more than it is today. And from the Germans, he borrowed from the Polygram. And all of a sudden it came due, and they didn't extend him any more credit. They said, nope, you got to pay it right now. And he said, man, I ain't got $6 million. I can't pay it right now. And they said, well, we'll take these masters. We'll take these Allman Brothers masters, Marshall. We'll just take all you got. And so all of a sudden it's bankruptcy time for Capricorn. And nothing's shaking in Macon. Anyway, so Capricorn tanks, and about this time I needed a rest anyway. I retired for 3 years off. And that's a good time to rest on my laurels, if I have any. So I sat at home for about 2 or 3 years and raised kids. And then all of a sudden I just got the itch to, maybe I should get back in the studio business. And I'm sitting at home with a little 8-track recorder and a little mixer just to play with at the house, get my ideas down. And a guy called me up from Macon one day. I was always aware of him, but I didn't know his name was Randy Howard. And he played at the big country western nightclub here called Whiskey River. And he said, Hornsby, Randy Howard says, Warner, could you record some demos for me out at your house? And at this time, Capricorn was closed down. And I'm the only game in town, and it's not really a studio. And I said, well, I'm thinking, he's a country and western singer. He's got acoustic guitar, and he wants to sing. I might have to use 2 mics for this. And I said, how about tomorrow at 1 o'clock in the afternoon? About that time, I heard cars driving up, a van, a pickup truck, another car. I looked, and there was musicians getting out carrying drums and basses and guitar. I thought, wait, what? I said, man, I don't have a studio, man. And I said, all I've just got is some little portable 8-track equipment. And it looked like you could just see them. They were just disappointed as hell. Their jaw was, I said, I did some quick thinking. And I said, I don't even have enough mics and cables. They said, oh, we got a truck full of that stuff. They said, can we use these cables? So they brought them in. And I thought, well, I had a guest bedroom down the hall from my office where my mixer was. And we moved a bed out of the way and set up drums in the closet, and the guitar, we put it in the closet and put one in the bathroom. And we started cutting demos, and we got having so much fun. And he had this song called the All American Redneck. And it was a best known song you ever had. Well, they played that at Whiskey River. There was some certain 4-letter words and stuff. He'd get to that point, and he let the audience say it, and all the audience just loved. They just loved being able to cuss in the nightclub. He drives a pickup truck. He loves them, and they hold it on the audience, and 400 or 500 people yelling that out. And so we cut that in there, and the record sounded great. And it was just a home demo. And we got thinking about the one song that got everybody's attention was All American Redneck, and I thought, well, it didn't have that audience there. So when it comes to that blank, well, there's a blank. So we tried having the band yell out the words, and it just didn't have the impact of 400 people yelling that particular word. And so I sent them out. I gave them a quarter track reel to reel, and took to the club that night and recorded just the audience when they played the song. And then we brought that tape back the next day, and I timed it just so that every time they come to that spot, I'd raise that fader where that audience yelling. I got it right in sync, sounded like a live album. So I got thinking, man, I wonder if we could sell this album and say it's a live album and get away with it. And we did, and we sold it to Warner Brothers, to Warner Viva, actually. And it was a company owned by Snuff Garrett and Clint Eastwood. And they bought it. They thought it was a live album. It wasn't dishonest. It was kind of live. The audience was live. And this thing went to number 41 in Billboard in the nation. 41, cut in my office, on an 8-track. And I thought, man, we'll get back in the studio business.
Made Randy Howard's career too, which was
yeah, well, such as it was.
Yeah.
And I got looking around for a building for sale, and I was about to drive my wife crazy by this time, recording in our house, and she's trying to raise kids and guitar solos playing nonstop out of the spare bedroom. So that wasn't working out too good. So that was the birth of Muscadine Recording Studio.
And what a great studio. It's been here since 1982. I personally have cut most of my stuff here and played on lots of other people's tracks here. And so has lots of other people. And your album was recorded here as well, right?
Sure was.
Red Hot, recorded right here on Vineville Avenue in Macon, Georgia, Muscadine. Also, we got Fix It in the Mix, which is Paul's memoirs, stories of being Paul Hornsby all this time, which is pretty
interesting. You can't be Paul Hornsby, I don't know what you can be, so put it in a book. Fix It in the Mix.
Paul, thanks for joining us today. We're glad to have you, and vive le boogie.
Vive le boogie.
Thanks for watching this episode of Southern Rock Insider. Please hit subscribe and click the notification bell so you won't miss a single episode. If you have any questions or comments and suggestions for future episodes, please respond below, or you can email us at southernrockinsider@gmail.com. This is your Southern Rock Insider, Chris Hicks, and thanks again for watching.
Southern Rock Insider.